Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and now it's time for my real review of episode 7 of season 3 of Star Trek Picard. Yesterday I made a joke video on April Fools, so that was not a real review, that's not what actually happened in the show. Unfortunately, because as silly as some of those ideas were, I think they're probably better than what we're actually going to get. And they're setting up all these mystery boxes, which it wouldn't surprise me if they don't even answer them in the end of the season. Like, it's just a mystery box for the sake of it, and the writers themselves don't know the answers. I think that's possible. And now I realize why all those reviewers who got early access were only shown the first 6 episodes, because episode 7 is a huge drop in quality, in my opinion. And the most annoying thing to me personally is how things just don't make sense if you think about them. For example, they know now that the changelings keep chasing Jack Crusher specifically because it's so important for their master plan and all of that, and the heroes know that now. So why don't they simply hide Jack away until after Frontier Day is over and all of that? If they know that the villains need him for their plans to work, the simple solution is to hide him somewhere so the bad guys cannot find him in time and they can save the day that way. I guess they still want to help expose the conspiracy and all of that, so fine. So take Jack alone on a shuttle and make him fly into some nebula and to hide for a few days. I guess they still want to discover the Changeling's conspiracy, but they can do that without Jack. And at this point, they don't even know that he has superpowers. Remember, they only said that they think he has Iromodic syndrome, and that's the reason for his visions and all of that. So they don't think that they need him specifically. They do know that the villains need him for something. So why not put Jack on a shuttle, make him fly into some nebula or somewhere to hide, and then take the ship to fight the changelings and all of that. So it makes no sense that they do the opposite. They set a so-called trap for the villains so that they can come aboard their ship where Jack is and just help them get him. And so this is really annoying that they're doing the opposite thing of what is logical in this situation. And also it's funny how they're all alone. They cannot find any potential ally anywhere in the galaxy that can help them out. Anyone they try to contact turns out to be a changeling, and so how many of them are there exactly? I mean, it cannot be that many, because in that flashback scene with Vadic, we only see that there were 10 changelings in that lab, including her. She did say that she can pass on the modification to other changelings, and so maybe the other ones came from the Great Link, the ones that Oda knew about, and so she also modified them. So I guess it can be any number, but even if it's a million changelings, like, you can still find allies somewhere in the galaxy. Like, go somewhere farther, go somewhere unexpected, recruit some allies. You don't be just on one ship against all of Starfleet. But I just can't see it be as many as it's implied here. Like, anyone they try to contact anywhere in the galaxy turns out to be a changeling. And why not just go to the public? Why not go to the media of the Federation? I know Ro did imply that she tried that and it failed somehow, so I guess they're in control of the media as well. They will censor any message they send to Earth and label it as fake news or something, and no one will believe it. So I guess it's possible, but it just doesn't seem that believable to me that they cannot find any allies anywhere, no one they can trust anywhere in the galaxy, as if changelings are everywhere controlling every single ship and all of that. So that makes it a little bit too far-fetched. And this whole plan to lure the bad guys to them when they could have just stayed in hiding, or at least hide Jack somewhere. No, they do the opposite. They lure the bad guys to them with some really bad, stupid plan, which doesn't work, and ends with the bad guys taking them over. So it's just stupid. And all the action scenes with the changelings are extremely poorly done, and it's such a waste of an opportunity, because if they didn't have the budget to do the changelings properly, then just don't do the changelings. Do the conspiracy bags from season 1 of TNG, as I suggested. It could have been the same general idea, and could have still been cool with, bugs taking over the people you know and all of that, so not knowing who to trust, all the paranoia stuff, a few fight scenes with the people who are possessed being slightly more powerful. It could have been cool anyway, and yet they chose to go with the changelings. Fine, the changelings are an awesome idea, but they use them so poorly and in an illogical way, because anytime we see a changeling fighting with someone, I'm just thinking, why doesn't the changeling simply morph or send out a tentacle to strangle someone or create a sword out of their hand, kind of like the T-1000. And changelings are capable of doing that, because we've seen that in Deep Space Nine. We saw a changeling stabbing a Klingon with its hand. We saw changelings strangle people with tentacles. We saw all of that. Now, there is the excuse in the show that these changelings are slightly different, so maybe they are weaker, they're not as agile, so fine. But then we see that Vadic does stab someone with a tentacle in the flashback scene, so they are able to do that. So if they are able to do that, then why don't they do that in all those situations in which that would have been so easy? And so that's what drives me nuts. That they have the abilities, just don't use them. And yes, all those bird creatures are actually changelings and barely use their changeling powers. And so that's just so disappointing, so annoying. The only thing that saves this episode from being a total waste of time is that we do have a few neat scenes with some good acting, which kind of saves the scene. Like that flashback scene with Vadik, LeVar Burton is great, Tim Russ was great as Tuvok, even though he turns out to be a changeling, and that was a neat choice to have specifically him in that scene because he's a Vulcan, he's not supposed to smile and all of that. And in the scene when the changeling knows that they know he's a changeling and then starts smiling, that is kind of creepy in a good way. And so that's why I do like some of these scenes, even though the details don't really make any sense. And so Seven is talking with Tuvok, trying to figure out if it's really him or not, and she's telling him all about the changelings, but then in her dialogue she kind of hides all kind of questions to try to test him and all of that. Now, why not simply come out and tell him, Tuvok, I want to make sure it's really you, since I just told you about the changelings being everywhere, and so let me just ask you a bunch of questions to see if you can answer them so I know it's really you. If he was really Tuvok, he would have no problem with it. So why the need to hide her questions in the conversation to try to trick him and so on? So it doesn't really make much sense. And also they kind of jump to conclusions. Like she says, oh, the real Tuvok must be alive because you knew that we played that game of cards together, so he must have told you, but she's the one who told it to him in this conversation, and he was simply kind of bluffing his way, saying, oh, you beat me many times, but he never told you that he played with you. You said that to him, so why are you now saying, oh, if you knew about that game, then the real Tuvok must have told it to you? But he could have simply bluffed his way in that conversation, so it makes no sense. And also that bit when he suggested meeting on some planet, and she offered the planet on which there were anti-Kolinaur demonstrations. Kolinaur is a Vulcan ritual, and he agrees to meet her there, and then she said, a Vulcan would never agree to go to that planet after those anti-Vulcan demonstrations. And I'm thinking, why would he refuse to go there if there's a crisis of galactic proportions? And that's the last place they would expect Tuvok to go, so wouldn't he agree to go there in this dire situation to help you out, despite all of that stuff? And why would the Vulcan even refuse to go to a place in which there were some anti-Vulcan demonstrations? Wouldn't they do the opposite? Wouldn't they want to go there and to start a dialogue or something? So there's so many problems with the details of it, and also after he starts smiling and admits that he's a changeling, then Picard asks him, where is Riker? What have you done with Captain Riker? Where is he? And I'm thinking, why would he know that? He's not on the Shrike, it's not one of the exact same changelings we saw, it's on some other ship in some other place in the galaxy. How would he even know what they did to Riker? Like, it's not as if all changelings are telepathically linked to each other in great distances. So how would that Tuvok changeling know about what the Shrike did to Riker? So that's just a stupid question to ask. And then he morphs into Riker and starts taunting Picard and all of that. And how would every single changeling everywhere have the exact memory of how to imitate any person that anyone ever mentions? That also doesn't make much sense. I mean, a changeling would know to imitate the person or a few people that are part of his mission. It's not as if they all have infinite memory and have studied the features of every single person in Starfleet. So he just randomly turns into Riker and implies that he knows what happened to Riker, even though it's a changeling on a completely different ship. And then they sever communication as not to be traced, and then Geordi says, it happens every time we try to contact someone, maybe we should just give up. And once again, Geordi seems kind of like a coward. I guess maybe he simply meant stop trying to contact people who might help us, which still is kind of stupid. Why not contact someone outside the Federation, just go farther enough to some more distant potential allies, get someone's help outside of the Federation maybe someone unexpected, that would be interesting. And I guess maybe they wanted Tuvok specifically because he's a Vulcan who is able to do mind melds. Maybe he would be able to detect anyone else pretending to be a changeling and all of that. So that could be useful. But why not just go to Vulcan and pick up some random Vulcan guy to help them do that? Or go to Beta Z and pick up a few Betazoids. I guess that's the reason that Troy is not in the season that much, because if she was on the team with them, then that will give them that ability, and the script didn't want them to have that because that would make it too easy. So everything is so convenient in the season for the plot to happen because there are like a million solutions to prevent all the bad things. And then they decide to set up a trap to deliberately call the Shrike to them, even though they know from the previous encounters that that ship is so much more powerful than them. So when that ship arrived, why didn't it simply capture them with a tractor beam? Why doesn't it use its transporters to beam everyone off the ship? Or to beam to the bridge of the ship immediately? Like they specifically mentioned, oh, we cannot use the transporters, let's use a shuttle. And we've previously seen these changelings use transporters, and so it cannot be some problem with their physiology or something that they simply cannot use the transporters. And so all of this was kind of stupid. So they allow the bad guys to board the ship, and then Jack approaches them, the guy they want most approaches them, and then runs away so that they will chase him. So I guess he knew they will not shoot to kill him, but they could have shot him with a stun setting and then just took him away, and that's it. But instead they chase him around the corridors. I guess they were going for that kind of scene like in Alien 3, when they were running through corridors trying to trap the xenomorph somewhere. So that's what they were going for, I guess. But it was all so badly done. And there are scenes of a changeling chasing LaForge's daughter, and he's literally inches behind her holding his gun right next to her and just doesn't shoot her for no reason and doesn't use a tentacle to catch her or nothing. And they barely use their shapeshifting powers at all. Even though they are all changelings, we find this out in this episode, that they are not some hybrids or something. They are full changelings. They have been modified, but they're still changelings who are able to use tentacles, and yet they don't for some reason, and they don't even use their normal weapons. And so all of this felt really cheap and lazy and stupid. And so they just trap all of them in force fields, and meanwhile they have lore slash data hooked up to the main computer. How come no one thought, wait a second, maybe just for the sake of precaution, maybe let's unplug lore from the computer while we're trying to set up this trap? We wouldn't want him to sabotage this, right? So why not put him into some closed room with no computer access just in case while they're doing this stupid plan? At least don't have lore hooked to the main computer while you're doing it. But of course they don't. And so lore sabotages the plan and lets the force fields down and all of that. So that was extremely stupid because it was so obvious that's going to happen, and yet no one thought about it. And then we have that scene of LaForge begging Data to hear him, even though Lore is in control. But there's that trope scene of saying, I know you're still somewhere in there, Data. I'm your best friend. Take over control from Lore, please, Data. And the acting by LeVar was excellent. I just wish the setup of it would have made sense. It doesn't make sense that they allowed him to be hooked to the main computer while they're doing this stupid plan, and then Lore sabotages it. And then we have that scene from the trailer when Lore closes the door and looks at him through the window, and Jordi says, Lore, as if it's the first time he heard that he's in that body. So it was so obvious it's going to happen, and yet none of the characters thought it might happen, so it makes all of them look stupid. And then Jordi has to beg Data to take over control from Lore, basically. And I suspect it might be the last time we even see or hear from Lore, because Data in the end did take over and save the day, so Lore, I guess, might be gone. And so if that's all they ever did with Lore in this whole season, that would have been just as disappointing as the Moriarty scene, which was just there to put it in the trailer, but didn't really serve any real purpose for the season. And so if Lore is gone and will not be any part of the plot anymore, then that makes him also just a tease to put in the trailer to lure us to watch the season. And then we have the scene when Dr. Crusher and Picard confront Vadic, who is trapped in a force field, and they try to interrogate her for why she wants their son, but she never gives them any answers, and so that's still a mystery. You know, Beverly could have done something like this way back in episode 1, when she had an injured changeling and she just chose to vaporize him instead of trying to interrogate him. And she didn't even know it's a changeling back then, which makes no sense, not just morally, but it makes no sense just why not get some answers from him to know who are chasing you and why. And also somewhere in this episode she said that she wants to create a new virus against these changelings. That might be the only way to fight them. And she's thinking of creating a new virus, but she's having a little bit of a moral dilemma. And Picard says, you know what, create the virus and then later we'll decide if to use it or not. And so all of that part is also funny to me because, first of all, when they talked about Section 31 in Deep Space Nine, they said that there must have been hundreds of people to create that virus and all of that, and yet Beverly thinks she can do something like that all by her own. And also, she says creating such a virus to target someone biologically is like genocide, but it's not really if you only use it on individuals, on the people fighting you, and not against their whole population, then technically it's not really genocide, it's simply combat. Yes, it's a biological weapon, which might still be unethical for all kinds of reasons, but it's not genocide. It's only genocide if you want to wipe out their entire species. But if you only want to infect those who try to harm you, then technically it's self-defense. And it's funny how Picard just tells her, just create the virus and later we'll decide if to use it or not. And when they confront Vadic, they also talk about the virus from the Dominion War, and she keeps accusing Starfleet for being evil, that they try to commit genocide against them, and at no point do they say it wasn't all of Starfleet, it's just a rogue group and all of that, because in the new continuity, it's now established that Section 31 is an official part of Starfleet intelligence, and so Starfleet and the Federation government is to blame, I guess. And they also never confront her hypocrisy about the fact that, even before the war, we've seen episodes in Deep Space Nine about how the Dominion was infecting other planets with viruses to punish them and stuff like that. So they've been doing that kind of thing themselves before. So it's really hypocritical for the changelings to be complaining about the thing that they themselves did to others. And also, Starfleet did, in the end, give them the cure. And that's also a contradiction with the dialogue here, because she says that Starfleet voted against giving them the cure and one of their own had to steal it. And that's extremely inaccurate, because it was actually Bashir and O'Brien who stole the cure from Section 31 and gave it to Odo. And it's true that Starfleet at first didn't want to give the cure to the rest of the founders, and later Odo just decided to cure the female founder. But after that, Starfleet did allow Odo to come back to his home planet and to cure all the other ones. And so in the end, they did allow for them to get the cure. It wasn't just Odo who just sneaked off and went there to cure them on his own. So it's extremely inaccurate, and they don't call her out on her lies and hypocrisy. And instead, Picard is almost apologizing to her that, oh, Starfleet was so bad, I didn't know, I'm sorry, and all of that. And then they have the flashback scene of how she was tortured as a prisoner of war when she was kept in the exact same Daystrom station that we've seen before. I guess they did it like that simply to save money on sets. They can reuse the same sets again. That's why she was on that specific station as a prisoner along with 9 other changelings. And that scene was also kind of cheap, but at least her acting made up for it. At least that scene was good overall because it was acted well. And all those little bits about what they did to the changelings in the lab was kind of dark but kind of funny at the same time. And they did answer one of my questions from the previous review when I asked who exactly is Vadic imitating and why. And it turns out that the woman who was experimenting on them is the face that she is now wearing to remind herself of her hate, something like that. And I guess it kind of makes sense. It reminds me of how Odo imitated Dr. Mora, who was also experimenting on him, even though it's kind of different because Odo kind of viewed him as his father because he kind of raised him, he also taught him everything. It was implied to have been kind of abusive, but it was still kind of being a parent to Odo, so it kind of made sense there. Here is just because she wants to remind herself of her hate of that woman who kind of whistled as she was torturing them. And I wish the dialogue would have simply said that that's where they developed the virus that they used later, that they captured a few changelings and experimented on them to find the virus and maybe accidentally mutated them in the process, something like that. Instead, they say that Section 31 deliberately enhanced these changelings to be even better changelings, and then those changelings escaped. So that makes Section 31 even stupider than ever before. Like, they put no surveillance there. There was only that one woman scientist studying them and no other guards, no other safety features, no security measures. They easily managed to escape that place, and Section 31 never warned anyone in Starfleet. Like, they knew that a few enhanced changelings managed to escape and didn't warn the rest of the Federation. So this makes Section 31 look kind of stupid, and so that's a problem, I think. And a few other nitpicks about that scene when she says her music was hearing the sounds of boots on concrete, and I'm thinking, why is there concrete on the floor of a space station? And also the sounds of those wheels in the lab, and that also annoyed me because, back in TNG, They sometimes showed us those mobile biobeds that they took injured people on, and it was implied as if they have no wheels, as if they are hovering. They kind of set up some lamps in the bottom and made sure that we don't see any wheels, and so it looked as if those beds are hovering over the floor. And here they show us like normal wheels. I guess it's possible they still use those, but why not be a little bit more creative? Why not show us something a little bit more futuristic? I know that budget restraints are a problem, but in TNG, they had a simple trick of putting some neon lights underneath that floating bed to make it look as if it's floating and not on wheels. And yet they don't bother to do that anymore, I guess. And so she was experimenting on the changelings to enhance them, and then one of the changelings somehow managed to escape and stab her from behind. And then it's kind of unclear, did the changeling kind of possess her body and merge with her, or was it simply imitating her? And how come Section 31 didn't alert anyone in the galaxy that these dangerous changelings escaped? I guess maybe the changelings left one of their own pretending to be that scientist lady in the lab and replaced the changelings in those tubes with some other liquid, and she just pretended to keep doing the experiments while the other changelings were no longer there. I guess it's possible, but again, I wish it would have actually been shown in a way that makes sense, because the way they showed it doesn't really make any sense. And then the most annoying thing in the whole episode probably is how Picard and Beverly both agree to simply execute Vadic. They say that, oh, she will never tell us anything more, so let's just kill her. And they did at least debate it for a minute, like they didn't immediately just decide, okay, let's kill her now. They did kind of have difficulty with it at least, but still they decide in the end to simply try to execute her. And that was before they knew that the force fields are going to fail. It was before they knew that Lore took over the computer and is going to lower all the force fields. It was before that. If they knew that, then it wouldn't be an ethical problem even, because she is extremely dangerous, and if the force field is about to fall, then they will be in mortal danger, so actually it would be justified to try to kill her if they know that. So I guess maybe that's why the script didn't want it to be that easy. So they don't yet know that she's going to escape, and they decide to execute their own prisoner. And so this is once again character assassination, especially of Picard. They already kind of ruined Beverly because she already killed the prisoner in episode 1 of this season, but now they do it with Picard. Now Picard himself also decides, let's just kill her. Even though you might think he might have a little bit of sympathy toward her after her story of how she was tortured by humans in that lab and all of that, so maybe he would try to talk with her some more to convince her that not all humans are to blame or something. But after just one conversation, he gives up on that idea. He says, oh, there's no way we can convince her of anything, let's just kill her without even trying. So once again they ruin the character of Captain Picard. That's one of the things that I personally, that's the reason that Picard was such a good character in TNG. The fact that he had a strong moral backbone and all of that. Now, I'm not against the idea of putting that character into desperate situations in which he would have to challenge his own views and all of that. I'm all for it. I was always curious to see what would happen if Picard was instead of Sisko in Deep Space Nine. What would happen if he was the one facing a war that might destroy the whole Federation? Would he do the dark decisions that Sisko did for the greater good, or would he stick by his principles and all of that? So that idea of putting Picard in such a situation, in such a dilemma, is a good idea, but the way they do it here is not really intelligent. There is no real reason for why they would want to execute her when she's their prisoner, when they don't yet know the force field is going to fall down and all of that. And so it's just the way it was done wasn't written cleverly, and that's a big disappointment, especially if you're doing something so big as to compromise the morality of your main character. At least make it justifiable, at least make it understandable in the situation. But no, they just want to kill her just in case, before they even know she's going to escape. And yet, even though they just decided to do it and they're aiming their guns at her and the force field falls and they're shooting directly at her and hitting her, still it doesn't work for some reason. I guess maybe Vadic is more powerful than the other changelings, maybe because she was the first one with that unusual mutation, which she then passed down to other changelings. Maybe she's somehow more powerful than them, and that's why the other ones are easily vaporized, and yet she can take multiple phaser hits without problem. So that makes Picard and Beverly seem even stupider. If they're not even sure that their weapons will work, then why even try to do it? It will only piss her off even more now. Now she'll be even angrier at them that they didn't try to spare her or anything. And also we know now that Jack is basically a telepath. He is able to read the mind of Sydney, and they're kind of setting up a romance between him and Sydney, and there's a scene in which he kind of reads her mind and is doing exactly what she wants him to do, but then she gets startled by that. So all of that stuff kind of reminded me of that Mel Gibson movie, What Women Want, when he could suddenly read the minds of women. And there is the potential to do some funny stuff with it, but they don't really play it for laughs. They just set it up that Jack is a telepath now, and later when they're running in the corridors fighting the changelings, he's able to help her out by kind of taking over her body and fighting in her place to beat up that big changeling, because the changelings are now physically so weak they can be easily beaten up by a human with his bare hands, and so the changelings are basically pathetic, so Jack is always able to easily beat them up with his bare hands, and now he's using telepathy to help Sydney beat up that big one, and yet the changelings still take over the ship, and Vadic sits in the captain's chair in the end, and that's the end of the episode. So not that much happened in the episode, and we did have a few cool scenes. I did enjoy the backstory of Vadic. It made her a little bit more sympathetic. I do have a problem with the details of it, and I enjoyed the Tuvok cameo, even though it does have a lot of problems with it, and I enjoyed LeVar Burton's acting when Geordi was begging for the life of his daughter and trying to get Data to reemerge and take over Lore, and so I'm hoping that Lore will have something bigger to do in the next episode. Otherwise, if that was it, that was all they used him for, that's another waste of a good potential, just like with Moriarty. So overall, the episode did have some redeeming moments in it, but overall I think it was the weakest episode of the whole season so far. So that's my opinion. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.